Mothers know all about life's tricky transitions. Thankfully, Ollie helps you prioritize wellness through every age, life stage, or magnificent mood change. Need a multitasking multivitamin that keeps up with you? How about an essential prenatal for you and baby? Ollie's got you through it all. Life's tricky. Your wellness routine shouldn't be. Get what you need at ollie.com.
Right now, get scary good deals on select Ring cameras and doorbells. See who's there. Keep your scaredy cats company.
Oh, it's okay, sweetie. I'll be home soon.
And protect your crypt from the real monsters.
Oh, come on. The sign says take one.
Save big on select Ring devices right now at ring.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Golden 20's podcast. My name is Sadie, and I'm joined by my co-host Tegan. And today's episode is actually a listener request. We are going to be breaking down our payday routines, which I think is actually not something we've talked about on the podcast before. I think like a long time ago, I did a solo episode breaking down my living expenses, which kind of is along the same lines as this, but it's either outdated now or I don't know. I guess we didn't do this together, so we never heard your side of it, Tag. So I'm excited for this. I think it is a great topic. We've been talking so much about how budget is top of mind for people, especially going into like holiday season and things like that. So could just be an interesting listen. But before we jump into that, let's start with a connection card.
Yeah, we're still in the pink category. This week's question is there a trait that you envy in others?
Yes. Being careful. Mine is being... Yep, there is, yeah. Mine is like being carefree. I care way too much about things. I am a very intense person. I feel very deeply. I feel deeply about things that really I don't need to feel deeply about. I don't need to care about. I've talked about this in more ways than one in so many different ways, I guess, in the podcast. If it's in my job, if it's with like friendships and stuff, I just feel like I'm super intense and carry everything very heavily. So I envy people who don't approach life that way and they're just carefree, like, what is the word I'm looking for? Like free spirits kind of thing. I really envy that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think for me, I envy people who are like highly motivated. I consider myself motivated, but at the same time, it's like a big insecurity of mine is how unmotivated I am, especially when it comes to like, I don't know, like random things like keeping my house clean and things like that. And so I'm always very jealous and I also am aware that it's like, of course, when I'm like at my friends' houses and things, they probably like tidied up because I was coming over and like all of this, but I'm always quite jealous. And I have some friends who are just like so highly motivated and have like been highly motivated for as long as I know them. And I'm just like, damn, I wish that I could be like that. So
the trick is showing up anyway, even when you're not motivated.
Yeah.
Showing yourself you're capable. I feel that's my go-to for that.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think like a lot of my like sleep journey and everything has been trying to like find the root to that problem. And where I'm like, is it mental health related? Is it like some health thing where I don't get enough sleep so I'm too tired? Or I feel like it's probably like a combination of a bunch of things. But then it's also like being restful is productive and it's okay to do that. But I don't tell myself that, and then I just get jealous and I'm like, look at all these other people who are so productive, and it's like, well, girl, maybe they aren't, maybe they're resting, you know. But especially
I feel like with the rise of TikTok and seeing people's routines and like their cleaning
Yeah.
routines. That's something where I'm like, I clean my house like once a week, but it's nothing compared to what I see on TikTok. Like there's just
Yeah.
like the amount of content we consume with social media. Yeah, you can always be doing more, you can always be doing better, and it's very hard to not be self-critical when you're seeing that all the time. So I totally get
sure.
where you're coming from.
Yeah. Great.
Cool.
Well,
Maybe another thing I envy is people who can set a budget and stick to it. Because today's episode, you are going to hear how I manage my money. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's not the best way. And I wanted to start by saying that because I feel like on our podcast, we walk the line of giving advice and sharing our personal experiences. And sometimes those things can get confused. And I just want to make it very clear that this is not an advice episode. We are not saying this is how you should manage your money, because, and why I caveat that for this episode specifically, is money is such a personal thing. And our reality is probably very different from your reality, if that's a positive or negative thing. And I don't know, I just thought I would caveat this episode by saying that for me, I've never been able to, like, I'm not good at tracking my expenses. Therefore, I find it really hard to stick to a budget. And I also really was never taught financial literacy. So a lot of what I do now is through trial and error, and also through, just pretty much trial and error, a lot of error. And now it's just habits that I've established for myself, again, both good and bad things. So wanted to just caveat that when you're listening to me rant about my finances, be nice to me, don't judge me. And hopefully, if you're in a similar boat to me, you feel validated, because I think that's the other thing, again, going back to like TikTok and the social media content that you see, if you were to like look up similar content to this, is you see people who do it really, really well, and then you feel insecure if you don't do it that way, or you feel, I think especially women and talking about finances, feel insecure if they don't understand what it is that people are telling them to do and, you know, the advice that they're being given. So know that you need to start somewhere, and hopefully us sharing our experience, again, is validating for you if you're in a similar boat to me.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's good to be, like, I guess, transparent about these sorts of things, because I feel like keeping them in the dark just like keeps the system the way it is. Like, it's the same with like discussing your like salaries, and how it's like you're not supposed to discuss your salaries. That's like tacky, that's bad. And it's like, well, it's just like benefiting your employers that like you don't know. You know what I mean? So
Totally.
I feel like, and then even like say with buying a house, I found that we were treated like we should know how to do everything. And I was like, it's probably because the people who are buying houses statistically own more than one property. So it's like a system that's set up where when you're in the system, it's just, you know how to play it and you can keep growing and growing. But if you don't know, it like makes it even harder. So I am quite excited to like dive in and try and share some things, just so that even if you're someone who's like, I have no idea how any of these things work, I come from a family where like everyone's in debt, like I have no financial literacy, whatever it is, we can hopefully just like open up the conversation and encourage people to like continue learning about their money and looking at their money, because I feel like that was a big step in my like money journey, was when I was, you know, in high school and working jobs, I would get paid and I'd be like, yep, if my debit card goes through on the purchase, that means there's money in the account and that's good enough. And I would consistently like spend my account to be to zero. And it's like, yeah, because I didn't know any different. And that's the way that things were set up for me. But then becoming more aware of money was kind of like the first step, I think, for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I feel like that's something I almost was the opposite, where not so much in high school, but like with my first part-time job, but when I was living in college and having like my own living expenses for the first time, I was living off like student loans essentially. So I always had money in my bank account, but I was so essentially like every semester I got a lump sum of money deposited to my bank account from like the Ontario government, and then that money had to last me that whole semester until the second semester's lump sum came in. And it really wasn't much. Like I would get $7,500 a semester, essentially. I think then they would deduct my tuition from that. And then I would have to pay like my residence and then all of my food and, everything for however long a semester is, 4 months or whatever, which is so funny to think of now, like living off even $7,000 if I got the whole amount to live off of for like 4 months. Like that's crazy to me, but it was possible then and I made it work. But because I was I have very deep rooted like financial insecurity in how I was raised, I was constantly checking my bank account where I was like, and it wasn't even that I was afraid to spend money because we know me, I'm not, but it was like, I just needed to know how much was in my bank account at all times. And I would like check my bank account multiple times a day, even if I knew I hadn't spent any money, just to be like, okay, how much money do I have? Like, it was just this constant stress weighing heavy on me. And to be honest, I feel that way now when I carry a credit card balance where I'm just like literally trying to fall asleep at night and I'm like, oh, but like, and then my brain just like starts, I don't know, it's the most bizarre thing. So I feel like just speaking to like financial insecurity, I feel like that manifests in different ways where either you're scared to look at your bank account or you check it like obsessively. And I feel like Tag, we're talking about that same problem, but from like two different, how we coped with it, I guess, was two different ways. But I don't know, I feel like you're onto something there where it's just like, just take a look, like don't shy away from it, you can acknowledge that it's an insecurity and acknowledge that you're scared, acknowledge that it's unhealthy to be checking your bank account that much, but I feel like it's good just to like have that self-awareness. And then once you have that, you can start addressing like, okay, so where is this coming from? Why am I this way? How am I going to fix it? What are my triggers? All of those other things that we talk about in just like your self-awareness journey in general, I feel like also apply to your money mindset and like, your money health. What's the word I'm looking for? Like financial, there's a word I'm looking for. I can't think of it, but just your positive relationship with your money, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there was that book that's like how to be a badass or you are a badass. And then she had the second one that was like, you're a badass at making money. And this again was like a big eye opener for me as well, because a lot of her, like, it's kind of a book about manifesting. So like you either like that or you don't. But a lot of it was just like money is not moral. And so whatever hangups you have around money, you need to get over it, because if you think money is bad, you'll never have it. If you think money's evil, you'll never have it. Like money is what allows you to live your life. So you should be like happy about money and grateful about money. And then you'll like start to make money and save money. And I was like, wait, she's right. And so that was another thing that was kind of like eye opening for me, that I was like, oh yeah, it's not moral. It's kind of just like a tool for you to use however you want.
100%. Well, Tag, do you want to kick us off and jump into your payday routine?
Yes. And I will say that I am only 1 month into home ownership. So this is kind of like the plan we've come up with. But is it going to be the reality? I don't know.
We'll report back. Yeah. We'll do a part 2 to this in a few months.
Yeah, like we could, do a check-in, and I will say if this is accurate, but this is the way I have it set up now, and we will see. I also have a lot of outstanding debt. Hopefully the most outstanding debt I will have in my life, unless I buy a bigger house or a second house. So keep that in mind as well. But for my pay, I get paid on the 15th. And the last day of the month, which is kind of weird. I've like never had a job that does that before. I think in every other job had just gotten paid like every 2 weeks, however that shook up. But this one's the 15th and the last day. And I kind of like it because it means that all of my automatic payments, if I set them for a day of the month, like I know they'll go through, where sometimes things can get mistimed when it's every 2 weeks. So I don't know. That's just kind of random. And they all just got like automatically deposited into my bank account. They get deposited into my savings account. And then I have a automatic transfer from that account to a shared checking account. And this is an account I share with my husband. he makes significantly more money than me. I think almost like 40K more a year than me. So we do all of our math by like percentages. The other thing is we split everything, which this is a very hot topic on the internet. People are very pro, like, men should be paying for X, Y, and Z.
Oh.
They think like if you're splitting expenses, dump him, blah, blah, blah. I see this all the time and I do not agree, but like I see a lot of things that are like, if your man's not paying for you to get your nails done, what are you doing? And I'm like, so wait, like you have to perform femininity for your man, because that, like, just so gross.
What?
But
yeah, I could see the argument. So this is actually interesting since like Tegan's married, I'm single. Like I feel like you're gonna get two totally different perspectives out of this episode, which is great. But so being single, I really have no right to have an opinion on this, but I've heard people talk about like, do you split things evenly if men statistically make more money? So it's like if he makes 40% more than you said 40, but whatever that is, like, should you be splitting things 50-50 or should you be splitting things like 70-30, 60-40? And that I feel like could be a valid argument. But splitting, like, the argument to me is not if you're splitting things or not. It's just what is the percentage that you're splitting. Like, I can't even imagine asking somebody else to like pay for my nail appointment or like even like so I don't know. That is so bizarre to me. I've not heard that. That's crazy.
I see it on TikTok. I don't know. So yeah, we split it by percentages, but because he makes so much more than me, it's makes it so that if we are splitting things like the mortgage, which is quite a big expense, a significant amount of my paycheck is going. So it's split that 80% of my paycheck goes to our shared checking account. And it's the same for him. So a lot more goes in, and that's good. But then it's still just like, you know, the classic, like, how should you be breaking up your paycheck? It's always like 50% should be going to your living expenses. Well, I am blowing that out of the water, but a lot of our expenses come out of this shared account. So not only does our mortgage come out, but our car payments, we actually just got a new car because why not just add to the debt? And
again, this is not an advice episode.
No, it's just the way things shook out. And of course, before we make these decisions, we like calculate, is it going to actually work? And it's the same. Like before we bought our house, we did all the calculations because our bank was actually pre-approving us for way more money than what our actual max was. Yeah, because like it's good for the bank if you lose your house, because then they just get to keep all the money, and isn't that fun for them? So my mortgage is just under $4,000 a month, and that like is coming out of the shared account, so it is split between the two of us, but still. And that is at 5.09% fixed interest rate for 5 years, if anyone's interested in those sorts of things. And then, we have the car payments coming out. So that's $520 a month until the $11K cost of the car is paid off. Again, that's split. And then out of this checking account, all of our shared expenses come. So that includes our parking pad for the house. We have like some rentals in the house, like our hot water heater. That's coming out of that. Our hydro, our insurance for the house and the car. Like our subscriptions, we have like a Ring doorbell. You have to have a monthly subscription for that. Things like that are also coming out of that account. And we also have a shared Amex credit card where we put all additional shared expenses. And this includes like going up for dinner, if we're buying someone a birthday gift, gas, we put them all on this credit card, and that is paid through this account. And there's like a bunch of other random things like Spotify, all of our streamers, like a lot of little things, Google Drive, and that is all coming out there. I will say all of our like Spotify payouts for this podcast and our affiliate link payouts also get deposited into this account. And then I usually e-transfer them into my personal savings account, because I'm like, that's my money. And then he has a podcast as well, my husband. And so all of his which of course are way more, because this is the theme, get transferred into like his personal account, and then that's just our own like fun spending money. And the same with the 20% that stays in my savings account from my paycheck. It stays there. So I am trying to build up my savings. We did have to dip into our emergency fund in order to get our mortgage payments lower. So when we bought the house, we were planning to only put 15% down, but then the bank made us put 20% down. And so I'm trying to build up my emergency fund to be around 40K. So that's what most of my money is going to right now, because I want to have that money set aside in case I lose my job, because I have lost my job many times and am aware that that is a very real thing that can happen like at any time. I am covered with my husband's savings if that happens, but I want to have my own and be covered and just build that up. And I always think it's good for a girl to have her own money, just in case. So I'm currently at like 15K saved, trying to get that up to 40. That's the big thing. And I usually keep this in a TFSA. Maybe that's a hot take. I know like a lot of finance girls are very opinionated about this kind of stuff, but I just find this is what works for me. The other thing is I have to pay back my RRSP, because you're allowed to take that money out in Ontario for a first home purchase. So I completely wiped that out. It is currently sitting at 0, but I have to pay that back over the next 15 years. So my plan is, once my emergency fund is back to where it is, I will set up automatic payments for that. I was previously putting in like a pretty high automatic payment, like I think it was $500 a month. I don't think with my current mortgage that I will realistically be putting that much away, but we will see. And I might start even with just like something very small, like $25 a month, just to like get the ball rolling, get things sitting in there. So that is a part of it as well. My parents also gave us money for a down payment, so we have to pay them back for that eventually. So they loaned us $100K. They didn't give us a time frame for paying that money back. And we've had discussions about, basically, it's not a gift, because if my brothers buy a house, they want to give the same for them. So it might be a situation of, if my brothers are buying a house, we would just give my brother $100K, something like that. So we'll see how that shakes out. But that's third on the priority list behind building up the savings account, building back the RRSP, and then that. So yeah, those are kind of like the big picture. I don't know if we want to go to yours, Sadie, so that I'm not just like talking away. And then I have some more just like my freelance money and tips and tricks, but maybe we can go to you and hear your routine. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Wow. So interesting. And I feel like we've talked about things just since Tegan and I are obviously best friends and we talk about this kind of stuff, but it's just so interesting to see how it all, like, how you've laid it out. I'm just like, wow, so fascinated and so crazy. But girl, I'm so proud of you. That house, man.
Thanks.
It'll be, I feel like it'll take a couple months for you to be like living this reality, to be like, okay, how does this plan actually shape up? Because I think that's my problem with sticking to a budget, is I put it on paper and I'm always like, this looks great. And then the month goes by and I'm like, wait, none of that went to plan. Like, and it might just be because I don't track my expenses super close, but I just feel like seeing it on paper, living it is a few different things. So be kind to yourself for the next few months as you live through it. But I'm confident you guys will figure it out as you go.
I do feel like it has been at least a build up to get where it is now, where over the summer I was like, could not sleep because of the money spent on this, which I actually have a friend who's also trying to buy a house. And she's like, I'm feeling like physically sick when doing this. And like, I can't sleep because I'm thinking about the problems. Do you think that's normal? And I was like, yeah, girl.
Yeah.
I think that happens to everyone. Yeah. So, but then it's like, by the time we got into the house, it had been like 3 months of getting there, which is good. But then there's also like, we are trying to play it safe as well, because we've never been homeowners. So we don't know the cost of like upkeep for a house, because when you're just like in a rental, if there's something that goes wrong, you tell your landlord and they come and they pay for it. And that's theoretically what your rent's paying for. So there is also that element where we have had a lot of expenses up front. But then I'm like, is that just because we're just moving in and like this is how it is? Or will this continue forever and ever until we sell this house? I don't know.
You will find out. But yeah, at least you and your husband make a good like partnership, you know? So I'm like, at least you're in it together. You guys will figure it out. Okay, so for my kind of like structure and key living expenses. So going back to what you were saying, Tag, I get paid every 2 weeks, and I've always gotten paid every 2 weeks. Sometimes, like some previous jobs, it's every other Thursday. Right now, I'm every other Friday. And before my paycheck even hits my bank account, I participate in like a RSP program. RSP is Registered Retirement Savings Plan here in Canada. I feel this is similar to maybe 401ks in the States or whatever they're called. But anyways, if you hear us talk about RSPs, that's what that is. So I participate in a company match program at my work. So before taxes are deducted from my paycheck, they take 5% of my paycheck and they invest it into the RSP program at work. And then the company matches 5% as well. I could invest more, but I just do 5% since that's the company match. However, once then I get taxed on it, my money gets automatically deposited to my checking account. And then I have a few automatic payments come out of that. So once it hits my bank account, I have another automatic payment going to my own personal RSP. This is where I do the rest of my savings. Probably like another 5%-ish, I think, goes to my own RSP. And then I also have an automatic payment going to my TFSA. And those are also scheduled bi-weekly. So you're kind of saying, Tag, like, you like the 15th and 30th or 31st of every month so you can schedule your automatic payments. But for me, knowing I get paid every other Friday, I have these automatic payments come out every other Friday as well. And my TFSA, that is where, so I also have a savings, like high interest savings account that I use like fluidly, I guess, throughout a month. I have 1 month's worth of living expenses in that high interest savings account. And basically between paychecks, if I ever need like a couple $100 or if something comes up where it's like, I don't know, I need a little bit more money, I dip into that. Other times, the other like emergency fund for my living expenses sits in my TFSA, and then I'm constantly contributing to that. So if things like big trips come up or like big purchases where I need like thousands of dollars at once that I don't just have sitting in my bank account, that's where I would go for that type of money. But then everything else is locked into my RSP for like long-term investment. I can't access it, which is very important to me since I am somebody who likes to spend my money. Keeping as little money accessible is important for me. That's why the bulk of my emergency funds and savings are in my TFSA, just because it's a little bit harder to access. So that is kind of the structure of like my bank accounts, I guess, where those automatic payments are going, and my savings within my like living expenses kind of ramble side. So this is where it's like, I know this isn't efficient and this isn't a good way of doing things, but this is how I've done things for a long time. And now it's just like a hard habit to break. But essentially 1 paycheck a month goes to covering my rent and my bills for the month. It will also cover my 2 weeks worth of groceries. I make sure like that 1 paycheck before my rent comes out, because my rent also comes out on the 15th of every month, not the 1st. So like my first paycheck of the month, essentially, I'm like, okay, this needs to cover my rent and then also groceries for the first 2 weeks, and then also my bills. So since I just rent, I'm not a homeowner, I don't own a car, my bills are extremely limited. I just pay for hydro, which is electricity, internet, and phone, my hot water, what else? Like gas, all of those things are included in my rent. So I really just have to pay for electricity, internet, and phone. My rent is $22.45, so just under $2,250 a month. And then hydro, internet, phone, like all of that adds up to like maybe another, I don't know. I didn't actually write it down. I should add it up. But again, this is all broken out in my living expenses episode. But anyways, so first paycheck of the month, I typically cover all of those things. And then the second paycheck, I'm paying myself back. So I was just talking about how I always have like 1 month of living expenses in my high interest savings account where it's like fluid. So this is if I dipped into that for any reason, I'm putting money back there. If I had to dip into my TFSA for whatever reason, like if I just booked a big trip and then borrowed money from myself, I pay it back with that second paycheck in the month. Or I also pay back my credit card. And I mentioned this already at the top of this episode, but I really, really, really try not to carry a credit card balance because I am somebody who loves to spend money. And if I am not paying back my credit card, I've learned it snowballs very quickly. And I've only paid interest like twice in my life. And like classic Sadie story is the first time I was ever charged interest on my credit card. I called my dad being like, oh my God, somebody has used my credit card. What is this charge? And he was like, no, that's interest. And ever since then, I was like, nope, this is never happening again. This is it scarred me. So I try very hard to not carry a balance. And yeah, I just need that for myself. So that second paycheck, I'm often putting like a lot of money on my credit card every month. And I'm just like expensing things like restaurant shopping, all of my subscription services. So like the Spotify's, the Netflix, Crave, all of that stuff, Uber Eats, all of that's linked to my credit card. So that adds up in a month. So I use that second paycheck to just pay off absolutely everything, even my fitness classes, if it's my yoga classes, othership, those sorts of things, paying those off. I also get laundry money out every couple months. Really, my laundry is super cheap in my building, which is definitely a privilege. But things like that, even like nails therapy, I make a monthly donation. Like all of this is what comes out of my second paycheck.
Love it.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, I feel like
it does, but it doesn't. Because I'm like,
no,
I feel like in the ideal world, what I want to do is have both of my paychecks go towards rent, not like one. But I'm like, I've been doing it this way for so long. And I will also actually say there was a time in my life where one paycheck wouldn't cover my rent. So like that's obviously when things were a little bit more strapped and I was living with like not being able to pay off my credit card every month. And like a lot of the things that I do now, again, it's been like through trial and error and stuff. But one of the big things I like try to crack all the time is like, having both paychecks essentially go towards my rent rather than when my rent comes out, I'm like waiting for my next paycheck to pay for everything else, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, I think, I get what you're saying. I think, I feel like there was a stat, but I can't remember, where it was like the majority of Canadians do live that way, though.
Yeah.
Like whether you want to, I get that you don't want to, but it is probably like more normalized than
definitely. And it's interesting because I'm like, I do and I don't feel like I live paycheck to paycheck because I'm like, I am still saving and I'm not really carrying too much debt. Like, of course, my credit card racks up throughout the month, but then I pay it off. But I'm like, but I still can't get a handle on managing my expenses around my rent because there's a certain time of the month where I'm like waiting for my next paycheck. And I'm like, okay, in that case, I do live paycheck to paycheck, you know? So I don't know. It is very tough for me to figure out for some reason. I feel like having that high interest like savings account as like my fluid, because I can't save money or spend the money that's in that account. Like if I'm debiting or something, it has to come from my checking account. So oftentimes I'll like put money in there and just like transfer it to my checking account as I need it. And I find that helps me live less paycheck to paycheck, but I don't know. It's a tough thing for me to crack for some reason.
No, I get that. Yeah. I think I'm kind of similar where I try not to carry a balance on my credit card. I do put everything that I possibly can on credit cards, which maybe that's like a hot take or whatever. I have like a couple of my like money rules that I tend to follow. So one of them is if your bank offers you more money, accept it, which I know you do not follow this rule, Sadie, but it's something that I definitely do. So every time they offer me a line of credit, I accept it. Every time they offer a bigger balance on my credit card, I accept it. And like my reasoning, I've talked about this before on the podcast, but someone I worked with was like, you should do that because if you're ever in trouble, your bank will not give you extra money. They'll only offer
when you
it to
need
you.
it.
Yeah, like when you're in a good financial situation. So he was like, always accept it when they give it to you. So I've been doing that, but it has just kind of sat there empty. Like I've never used the line of credit, but it is kind of like a nice security blanket to be like, if something majorly messes up in this house, like our air conditioning breaks tomorrow, we could put it on the line of credit and it would be okay or something like that. So that's kind of something I follow. And then I use my credit cards for everything because I like to use the points. But this is because I pay it at like pretty much the same time every month. The only time I have not paid it is I read that it can help your credit score to leave a little balance on it. And so every once in a while, I'll be like, I'll leave a balance and just like get a couple dollars worth of interest to purposely try and build my credit score. So, and like, I don't even know if that's true. I think I read that on Reddit. So like, that could be a lie, but I do have a good credit score. So maybe that's why. I don't know. And like, I've heard if you have a loan and then you pay it back, that brings down your credit score. So I'm like, that does kind of make sense. I don't know. So yeah, that's, but I try not to like carry debt month to month, and then I will use my points usually on flights. So I can usually get like 1 or 2 flights a year for free using points.
Yeah. I think this is the next step of my financial journey where I'm like, okay, I finally feel like my early 20s creating my own life, having my own living expenses, like figuring things out for myself, making my own money. This was like a pivotal time to shed the idea of money is bad because Tag, you were talking about like that mindset. That is the mindset I was raised with, where it's like, you will never have enough money no matter how hard you work, but you have to work really hard for it. This was like what was ingrained in me. And I believe that so much. So then starting to make my own money, I started to be like, no, actually having money is like a very liberating thing. And it's a positive thing. And money is, why I'm able to travel and get my nails done and shop and stuff. Like it's a really positive thing. So that was that. Then my mid-20s was me making all these career moves to earn as much money as I could so that I could fund a lifestyle that I really wanted. So traveling, living on my own, things like that. And now I feel like in my late 20s, heading into my 30s, I'm trying, like the next step for me is to like make my money work for me rather than me always working for my money. And I feel like the points thing is a big one. Also, I don't know, like even like savings and lines of credits and like all of these things, like, I don't know, I feel like people, I think it's again just like lack of financial literacy and like our education system and all of this, where people who have a lot of money, I don't know, like if your parents teach you how to invest and like you see them use their credit card for everything because they're now booking family vacations with points, like this becomes inherent to you. But if you don't get exposure into that, that's the mindset is you have to work really hard for money. And I'm like, living in the city, that is not the case. Like I see people's money working way harder for them than they are for it. And I want to be one of those people. So that's kind of, my long-winded rant for that.
No, I love that. I'm definitely not like a points girl. Like we have one friend who she is like hacking the system, but it is a lot of time. Where I'm like, that's time I could be freelancing. This is what I tell myself with everything. Every time I take an Uber, I'm like, well, but if I, my hourly rate, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But so it is a lot of time where it's then like, do you want to like spend the time to get into it? And so I think it's like finding the happy medium of like spending the time to hunt for like the points deals and like make those things work versus like the convenience of things and all of that. Something else that I've been like trying to wrap my brain around, like since I read that you are a badass at being money or at saving money, whatever it is, making money, whatever. But she talks about, like, if you want something, just pay for it and you will figure out a way to make it work. And I'm like, I don't know if I believe that, because I have so many friends who live by that. And these are girls who are like, every couple of months, like what I call them, they're like, I just cut up my credit card, because, you know, like, it's that very much like Confessions of a Shopaholic spending, where, so she's like, if you want to be the kind of person who drives a luxury car, buy a luxury car, because then you'll be forced to figure it out. And this is something I really grapple with, because I will always pick the cheapest thing, even if I can afford the more expensive thing. And so this is something that I'm just like, I don't know, because I can see how it's a slippery slope. And the only time I've like ever played with this was when I bought my Dyson Airwrap, because I was like, when I either get a raise or get a new job, I will buy a Dyson Airwrap, because it is expensive. It's like almost $900, which is, you know, a lot of money. And I was like waiting and waiting and nothing was happening. And then I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to buy it. And if I want to be the kind of girl who has that, I will figure it out. And then I bought it. And the next day I got a raise and like a job interview.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, maybe I should like lean into that more. But then I'm like, maybe that is crazy. I should not.
Okay. I also love that book, because it was the first time I ever felt validated in how I viewed money. Because I think the thing about my family is we all view money the same way, how I was raised, kind of like I was saying, where money is a bad thing, where this book is the opposite, like you're saying, where it's like, no, money is a good thing. And it totally shaped my perspective. But then all of a sudden my parents, my sisters, like they would comment on things like how frivolous I was with my money. But I'm like, but at the same time, I'm finding a way to make it all work. Like, and I literally feel like that book, like what you were just describing of like, just do it and you'll figure it out. That has been me my entire life. And even still, I'll like freak out, or my entire 20s of making my own money, spending my own money. But I'll freak out frequently to be like, especially if there's a big expense coming up, I'll be like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do it. But I still do it. And then it always works out. But it is a slippery slope, because I also can see, and again, seeing like my parents deal with debt their whole life, I can see how one wrong move can screw you for a really long time. And I think when it's like buying a luxury car, like that is an example in the book where just buy like a luxury car, where it's like, okay, but that could be like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah. And like, that's a lot harder to figure out than like a $3,000 trip to like an all-inclusive resort somewhere. So I'm like, I believe in it. I've seen it work for me. It was the same thing, actually. I was reading the book at the time of my roommate moving out. I was just finishing paying my student loans, and I was paying for a trip to Bali. All three really big like expenses. And I was freaking out, being like, how am I going to do this? Like my living expenses are doubling while I am still paying student loans. And now I've committed to this trip next year. So I journaled about it. I was reading this book at the time. I journaled about how much money I needed to make. And literally I remember it was $13,500 of a gap. And I can't remember what it was, if it was like expenses for the rest of the year between how much I had my student loans, my Bali trip, like remaining amount, and then my living expenses for the rest of the month, which was like August to my roommate moved out, I think September. So it was like September to December of just my own living expenses, not splitting with anybody. And it was $13,500 I had to come up with. And the same thing happened where that's when I got my first freelance opportunity. And all of a sudden I was making like thousands of dollars more a month from freelancing. And it was just like, okay, I always say this, I don't know if I believe in manifesting, but I've happened to have done it a few times where it's hard to like argue with it. But I'm like, if it was more than that amount of money, or if I hadn't yet booked the Bali trip, but then I did in that moment, where now, you know, would it have played out the same way, or would I just be rolling around in debt right now? And knowing how much interest can like snowball, I don't know. I feel like it's interesting advice in the book. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think
it's so interesting.
It's something to think about. I don't know if I would like recommend it, but it's like, I don't know, something to think about.
But at the same time, I feel like I'm always like, Tag, just like spend your money, do it. Like buy the Dyson hair wrap. Like you've wanted it for years. So I feel like I get it, but then I don't know.
Yeah. There is definitely the side. There was this article I read, I think it was like in the Atlantic, and I feel like we could do a whole episode about how like your fears are actually holding you back. But it's about how people who come from backgrounds where they don't have a lot of money, even when they tend to have more money than people who came from wealthy backgrounds, but they spend way less because they have like ingrained to always be saving. And so then it is kind of like a good reminder for me, because I am always like cheaping out and saving, and I'm like, no, maybe sometimes you can go like buy the Dyson Airwrap, because then the amount of people who were like, well, why didn't you buy the Shark? And I was like, because I wanted the Dyson, and this is what I decided. You know what I mean? So I'm like, maybe I should just try and do a little bit more of that and not just being like scared. Because even like with the lead up to the Dyson, I had multiple freelance contracts where I was like, I'm doing this contract to pay for this Dyson. And then the contract would end and I'd be like, well, it could be good for that money to just sit in my savings account and it was like I was talking myself out of joy, or like delaying the joy while continuing to do the hard work. So it's probably just like that you have to find a balance between like your spending and your saving. Take it. Like so obvious, but
no, I think it's good. And it's just so interesting because again, we come at it from different perspectives where you're needing to tell yourself to spend money and I'm telling myself to save money, but we have like the same problem. You know what I mean? So
they're rooted in like the same
same things. Yeah.
We should be married and then we'd have the perfect spending habits.
No, girl, you
and
could
we wouldn't
not be
resent
each
other.
You would hate living being married to me. You'd be like, seriously, you're spending money on this? Seriously, you went to Sephora again? Like, so funny. You bring up, okay, this is going to be a whole other rant, but I wanted to touch on freelancing for a second because this is another big thing of my financial journey I've been on through my 20s and it goes back to financial insecurity that we've been talking about through this episode. The biggest thing that I feel like I cracked with freelancing, I tried freelancing for many reasons. Like I just mentioned, it came at the perfect time where I needed extra income. So it was just perfect timing. I also wanted to try freelancing because I had the vision of running my own business. I wanted to get that experience of like having clients, running my own business in terms of doing the work, but also like the invoicing and the client management and all of that comes along with having your own business as well. So I was like, this is perfect. I started freelancing. I was working around the clock. My mental health was an all-time low. Dare I talk about my skin concerns and what I've been dealing with since 2020 2019 when I started freelancing. Like I was stressed, okay guys, but I was making a shit ton of money. And again, at the time I needed that because I was living on my own for the first time, like didn't have a roommate to split living expenses with. Like so much was going on where it was good to have that amount of money, but it became, I couldn't say no because I got into this like freelancing agency thing where so many clients and opportunities were coming my way. And I was saying yes, because all I could see was dollar signs. And I was, again, rooted in a place of financial insecurity. It's like, you can never have, or the idea of like, you need to work really hard for your money was part of that like narrative I was telling myself, but also like, why would I turn down money? No. So it took me, I think, a full year of freelancing, maybe a year and a half, all mental health being at an all-time low, to realize this isn't worth it. And I know that's coming from a place of privilege. In that time, I also was making moves in my corporate career to change companies, chasing a promotion, chasing raises, where I've like substantially grown my corporate salary to a point where I don't need to freelance to make ends meet. But I wanted just to mention this while we're talking about financial insecurity, because I've gotten to a point, again, through trial and error, through hitting all-time lows with mental health, where I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't want to freelance anymore because just to make extra money, like that doesn't, a dollar amount, I guess the like whole, to sum this up with like tie it up with a nice bow is financial security does not equal a dollar amount or like how much you're seeing in your bank account. It really is a mindset. And if you're constantly hustling because you're like financially insecure, like there will never be a point where you're content with how much you're making. Like you need to kind of do that inner work to unlock the financial security rather than just accepting every opportunity to chase the dollar signs.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. I am still freelancing. I don't want to, but I have certain clients who will not stop. But I think a big like thing that shifted my mind around it was once we started being able to have ads on the podcast, which we do not make a lot of money off of that. I think we make like $10 a month, and then it's like split between Sadie and I. So it's like $5 American dollars. But
yeah, I think the last deposit you gave me was like $7. I was like, oh, hell yes.
That's a coffee. So like it's not a lot of money, but I was like, I am spending all of my free time freelancing, and obviously I'm making more than $5 a month. But it's not bringing me the same amount of joy that like the $5 a month is. And now I don't have time to be leveling up the podcast like I want to. Where I'm like, if I was spending all of my freelance time doing like TikToks for the podcast and like engaging on the platforms, blah, 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 whatever, like elevating the edits, maybe I'd be making $15 a month. Like, I don't know. But it was just like, realizing that a lot of my time is spent in this way that's not bringing me joy. And I'm like, why can't me working 40 hours a week be good enough when I already have a side hustle with the podcast and like I've got a lot of shit going on? But then it is like, it's hard to turn down money.
Yeah.
So this is the battle I face. I did also want to mention when it comes to freelancing, I keep all my freelance money in a separate account, because I am quite bad at math and I do not trust myself to figure out the taxes. And so this is probably the worst way to do this. And like financial people listening are going to be like, what are you talking about? So I keep all of my money in one account and I do not spend it until tax season comes along. And then I have to pay my taxes. And then it's like, okay, all of this money is now mine. So it literally just sits in accounts for like an entire year. For some of it.
That's kind of cute. I feel like you give yourself a little bonus, like an annual bonus.
Yeah. It's like, oh, look. So that is the way I do that. I did want to ask if you have any stocks, Sadie.
No, not anymore. I used to work at Home Depot. They had an employee stock purchase plan, which I don't think is insider information.
No, that would be like their benefits or whatever.
Yes, they didn't do like a retirement savings plan. They did stock incentives instead. And at the time I did have Home Depot stocks, but I no longer have them. And now I don't have any stocks.
Yeah, I am not a stock girly.
I want to be.
I know.
Because I think we were talking about this, how since I'm such a spender of like a big purchaser, I need to instead be purchasing stocks, not product from like the trending brands, because I think Abercrombie's the perfect example. I remember vividly, I think it was 2018 or 2019, texting Tegan and my other best friend being like, Abercrombie is back, you guys. And it's like, had I invested in Abercrombie at that time before it like blew up to be everybody's go-to for wedding dress season and like everybody goes to Abercrombie for everything now, I would have been making so much bank off the stock as it would have gone up. I think the same thing about Substack right now. Like I was in on Substack and now it just keeps like blowing up. And I'm like, damn, really should invest in stocks, because I feel like I'm always, this is me tooting my own horn, but I know what people are like copped onto. Yeah. And instead I just buy and like be part of it, where it's like, no, I need to invest in these companies to make my money work for me rather than me just spending my money to fit in.
Yeah, that's what I try to do, but I'm using such a small amount of money because like we've been talking about, I'm very worried about spending money. So I only have like $1,000 around in stock, which like in the game of stocks is like nothing. But I'm only doing it because I wanted to do it just so that I could get experience. And so then I was like, what's the amount of money where if I lost it, it would be okay. And at the time it was $1,000. And so I successfully bought 2 stocks. And then I was like, okay, I'll do this. And then I pay my taxes. 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 And then I p and sold Lululemon, and I made like $500 or whatever. And now I have Gap because I keep hearing about the Gap on TikTok. So I was like, okay, maybe that's a thing. But on the other hand, I bought stock in Cineplex because I'm a big movie gal and I wanted to believe in my little Canadian corporation. And they were supposed to be bought by a UK company. That deal fell through, and that stock, it's like almost down to nothing. And I bought like $500 worth of Cineplex that's now just like gone, and I kind of don't think that's going to recover. Like Cineplex could go bankrupt, and I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
So there's that side of it too. I also have like $15 of Apple. And it's now like $17. So no big deal. I'm kind of a stock genius.
My thing with stocks, we really could have like 3 parts to this episode. But my thing with stocks is you still have to, when you sell stocks, you have to pay, is it the interest? Or like you have to pay, like you don't just earn the money that you made on your stocks. Like come tax season, you have to pay for your stocks and the income that you got from them.
Right, like taxes.
Yeah.
I just, all my earnings, I buy more stocks. So
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Like it scares me to be like, okay, because you need to know when to like buy and sell. And I feel like I could figure that out. But then to sell, because if you sell when it's high, got it, makes sense. But I'm like, but then I need to pay taxes on that? Like, that sounds like a ripoff.
Taxes in general. What a ripoff.
Yeah, people listening are like, yeah, girl, that's how it works and it's still worth it. But that's the part I can't crack on stock. So I'm like, as soon as I figured this out, they will hate to see me coming, you know?
Yes. Well, I feel like that's where we can leave it. Do we have anything else we want to share about our money journey? I feel like, we could definitely have more episodes on this.
Yeah, I feel like we could. No, I feel like part 2, I want to interview you about your split finances because I feel like that's a topic, like you were saying, so many people have so many different opinions and like get very heated, and not that there's a right or wrong way to do it, but I feel like I had so many questions when you were talking about that I think people would find interesting, just like how you split expenses and when you started splitting expenses in your relationship, when you opened that joint bank account, things like that. But anyways, if that sounds interesting to listeners, if that sounds interesting to our listeners, make sure you subscribe and keep an eye out for part 2.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's everything for this week. We've been yapping for so long, but hopefully this was like informative and like kind of different to what we normally talk about. A little more hard facts and data than usual. So you're like, maybe.
Sort of. I was like, then I do this. Then I do that. I know it's not good, but that's what I do.
It's all about that transparency. Come on.
Yes.
So, if you like this episode, definitely subscribe and follow us so you see when new episodes drop. They are usually out Tuesdays at 1 a.m. specifically, if you would like to listen right away. So definitely do that. In between, you can follow us on social media. We are at our Golden 20s on almost all of the platforms. And we also have a Patreon page, which is the best way to show your support for the podcast for as little as $2 a month. That's everything this week. So thanks for listening.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.